I'm Sarah Miller. I live in a small, second-story apartment that overlooks a quiet, tree-lined street. My world is one of order and silence, filled with the scent of aging paper and preservation chemicals, the life of a city archivist. It's a peaceful existence, a carefully constructed fortress against the chaos of a past I tried very hard to bury. But the thing about the past is that it never really stays buried. It just waits for the right moment to come knocking. This is the story of how a man who stole my life's work tried to erase me completely, and how he learned that you should never underestimate an archivist. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Chapter 1. The Foundation of a Friendship. It all started 25 years ago in a dusty university library that felt more like a sanctuary than a place of study. That's where I first met David Chen. He was a computer science prodigy, all nervous energy and brilliant, frantic ideas. I was a history major, obsessed with the tangible connection to the past that old documents provided. We were an unlikely pair, brought together by a shared frustration. He was annoyed by the clumsy, outdated software the university used for its digital collections, and I was perpetually disappointed by the valuable records that were decaying in forgotten storage rooms, inaccessible to the world. Our friendship was forged over late-night coffee and spirited debates. I would talk about the stories trapped in brittle letters and faded photographs, and he would sketch out code on napkins that could bring those stories to light. It was my passion for history and his genius for technology that gave birth to our project. We called it Veritas, Latin for truth. The idea was ambitious. A software platform that could not only digitize historical documents, but also use an intelligent algorithm to cross-reference them, uncovering hidden connections and making research intuitive and accessible for everyone, not just academics. For 2 years, Veritas was our life. We poured every spare moment into it. I spent my days in the university's special collections, carefully scanning delicate manuscripts and categorizing data, defining the logic that the system would need. David spent his nights turning my logic into elegant, functional code. We were a perfect team. He understood the structure, the ones and zeros, while I understood the soul, the human element behind the data. We filled whiteboards with flowcharts and scribbled ideas in the margins of textbooks. Our energy was infectious, and we truly believed we were on the verge of creating something that could change the world of historical research forever. The university provided us with a small grant, enough for server space and better equipment. Our faculty advisor, the Dean of Humanities, Annabelle Rodriguez, was our biggest champion. She saw the potential in our project and fought for us to get the resources we needed. "You two are building a bridge between the past and the future," she'd told us, her eyes gleaming with encouragement. "Don't ever lose sight of that." Our partnership was built on an almost naive level of trust. We never thought about formal contracts or legal structures. We were friends on a mission. The closest thing we had to a business agreement was a promise made over a cheap pizza one night in the computer lab. We scribbled our mission statement on a paper napkin, outlining our commitment to keeping the core of Veritas accessible for public institutions. At the bottom, we both signed it, laughing as David joked, "This is our constitution." I carefully folded that napkin and tucked it into a history textbook for safekeeping, a small memento of our shared dream. David was more than a partner. He was my best friend. He was the one I called when my experiments with document restoration failed, and I was the one who brought him food when he'd been coding for 24 hours straight. We shared a vision that was pure and untainted by the ambitions of the outside world. We weren't thinking about profit or market shares. We were thinking about making history accessible to a curious child in a remote village, about helping a genealogist find a long-lost ancestor, about preserving the truth for generations to come. Looking back, I can see how innocent we were. I saw our shared passion as an unbreakable bond. I believed that the purity of our goal would protect us. I saw David as my intellectual equal, my confidant, my partner in every sense of the word. I didn't see the shadow of ambition growing behind his eyes. I didn't realize that while I was focused on building a bridge to the past, he had started designing a blueprint for an empire in which I would have no place. The foundation of our friendship was solid, but I was about to learn that even the strongest foundations can be shattered by greed. My apartment, once a sanctuary of quiet order, transformed into a chaotic excavation site. I pulled out everything from my past that I had stored away, both physically and emotionally. Cardboard boxes, sealed for over a decade, were sliced open, releasing the musty smell of old memories. I was on a quest for provenance, the archivist's term for an item's history and origin. David was claiming Veritas was his creation. I had to prove it was ours, and more specifically, that its heart was mine. The task felt monumental. David's lawyers had a mountain of signed contracts, board minutes, and incorporation documents that painted me as a minor, early-stage employee. All I had was the truth, and the truth, I was discovering, was buried under an avalanche of my own painful memories and disorganized files. I started with the physical artifacts. I sifted through old college notebooks, my lecture notes, interspersed with frantic diagrams of Veritas's architecture. I found photographs of David and me in the computer lab, smiling and sleep-deprived, a whiteboard covered in my handwriting behind us. It was circumstantial, sentimental, but it wasn't the kind of hard evidence that would stand up in court. My public defender had assigned a paralegal to my case to help with document organization. His name was Chris Evans. He was young, maybe 32, with a sharp, intelligent gaze that seemed to take in everything. Initially, he was professional but distant, clearly viewing my case as another hopeless pro bono file to be processed. He watched me unpack my boxes of what he probably considered junk, his expression a mixture of pity and skepticism. "You know, Miss Miller," he said one afternoon, as I was carefully placing old floppy disks in a row, "the other side has 100 pages of signed contracts. A photo of you next to a whiteboard isn't going to do much." "Evidence isn't always on letterhead, Chris," I replied without looking up. "Sometimes it's hidden in the margins." My focus shifted to the digital realm. I resurrected my old college laptop, a heavy, clunky machine that took 20 minutes to boot up. I combed through ancient hard drives, searching for early drafts of the Veritas proposal, design documents, and anything that bore my digital signature. The breakthrough came from an old email account I hadn't accessed in 20 years. It took me 3 days to remember the password. It was the name of my childhood dog, followed by my library card number. The inbox was a time capsule. There they were, emails between me and David from the earliest days. I found the email where I first proposed the name Veritas. I found dozens of messages where I outlined the core logic for the document cross-referencing system, the very heart of the software, sending it to him for coding. He would reply with questions and suggestions, but the genesis of the idea was right there, in my own words, time-stamped and preserved in the digital ether. I printed them out, my hands shaking. I showed them to Chris. He read through them, and for the first time, I saw the skepticism in his eyes flicker and die, replaced with a spark of genuine interest. "This is good," he said, tapping a finger on a particular email. "This establishes your conceptual authorship. But it's still your word against his. He'll just say it was a collaborative discussion. I knew he was right. I needed something more, something undeniable. I needed a smoking gun. I thought back to the university, to the computer lab where it all began. All our work had been done on the university's network. Student projects, server logs. Could they still exist? It was a long shot. Digital data from 25 years ago was likely long since purged, but I had to try. Chris, now fully invested, helped me draft a formal discovery request to the university. Their IT department initially responded that records from that era were not maintained. It was a dead end. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. But then I remembered something. Our project, because it was grant-funded by the Humanities Department, had its server space allocated on a special long-term archival server managed by the library, not the general university IT. It was a detail no one else would have known. We sent a second, more specific request addressed directly to the university archives. A week later, a package arrived at the public defender's office. It was a single data CD-ROM. The archivist had found a backup tape from the old library server in their deep storage. On that CD was a compressed file containing server logs from the exact semester Veritas was created. Chris and I spent the entire night in his small office using an old desktop computer to extract the data. And then we found it, a log file, an immutable, time-stamped record. It showed a user account, s.miller, uploading a file named Veritas core_alpha.zip to the server. The upload was dated October 17th, 2 full months before David Chen's user account, d.chen, ever accessed the project folder. The core architecture, the foundational code that everything else was built upon, was uploaded by me, and me alone. Chris stared at the screen, his mouth slightly agape. "My God," he whispered, "this is it. This is the provenance. It's the digital birth certificate of the entire company, and your name is on it." We had found the truth, buried in a digital tomb for a quarter century. But I knew there was one more piece I needed. I went back to my apartment, to the box of old textbooks. I pulled out a heavy volume on medieval history, and there, tucked between chapters on the Byzantine Empire, was a faded, folded paper napkin. Across the top, in my handwriting, it read, "The Veritas Constitution," and at the bottom were 2 signatures, Sarah Miller and David Chen. It wasn't a formal contract, but it was a promise. It was the one piece of evidence that spoke not to the code, but to the soul of our partnership. I had my smoking gun. Now, I just needed to fire it. Chapter 5. The ace up my sleeve. With the server logs and the napkin, the entire complexion of our case changed. Chris Evans, once a reserved paralegal, was now a whirlwind of energy and purpose. He presented our findings to his boss, the head public defender, who looked at the evidence with wide, astonished eyes. The hopeless pro bono case had suddenly become the most compelling lawsuit in their office. The dynamic had shifted. We were no longer just defending, we were preparing to attack. Our strategy was simple and powerful. We would not engage in a lengthy battle of motions and countermotions. We would not try to settle. We would save our bombshell evidence for the courtroom. David's entire case was built on the lie that he was the sole creator of Veritas. His lawyers would have prepared for every argument except the one that mattered, the truth. They had contracts and corporate filings. We had the origin story, verified and timestamped. The weeks leading up to the preliminary hearing were a blur of preparation. Chris and I worked side by side, piecing together a timeline of events, cross-referencing the emails with the server logs, and building an irrefutable narrative. For the first time since receiving that dreadful summons, I felt a sense of power. The fear that had paralyzed me was replaced with a cold, clear resolve. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an archivist, and I was about to present my findings. One evening, as we were packing up, he paused and looked at me. I have to ask, why didn't you fight back when he first pushed you out? You must have known you were being cheated. I looked out the window at the city lights, thinking back to the woman I was at 28. I was a different person then. I was devastated. He didn't just take my work, he broke my heart. David was my best friend. When you're betrayed like that, your first instinct isn't to fight, it's to find somewhere safe to hide. It took me years to feel safe again. I turned back to him. He's made a critical mistake. He's suing the woman I am now, not the girl I was then. And this woman doesn't hide. A few days before the hearing, David's lawyers sent over a settlement offer. It was insulting. They offered to drop the lawsuit if I signed a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement with a penalty clause of $5 million and agreed to a permanent injunction against me working in any archival-related field, public or private. It was a demand for my complete and unconditional surrender. They wanted to own my silence. Chris slid the offer across the table to me. "It's their last move before the hearing," he said. "They still think we are scared." I picked up a pen, and in big, bold letters across the front page of the offer, I wrote a single word: no. I slid it back to Chris. "Mail that back to them." He broke into a wide grin. The battle lines were drawn. My ace wasn't just the server log or the napkin. My ace was the truth itself. David had built an empire on a foundation of lies, and a structure built on lies is inherently unstable. All it takes is one small, well-placed tremor to bring the whole thing crashing down. He had forgotten about the digital ghosts, the preserved promises, the meticulous nature of the archivist he had cast aside. The night before